Welcome to a special program on Halley's Comet. I'm John Horrigan, and tonight we're going to try to explain what Halley's Comet is, where it came from, why, and we've also got some pictures to show you. A comet is basically a ball of ice, dirt, and frozen gas, ammonia, methane, carbon dioxide, that is hurtling towards the sun. It's being pulled to the sun by gravity. Now, I was thinking of a good analogy to start off with, and if that snowstorm we got a couple of weeks ago, you see some clowns driving down the highway without brushing off their car, without the snow, and the snow comes flying off. Well, use that as an analogy, as if the snow were the comet flying off and driving, it's being pulled by gravity. But to start out, we're going to show you the composition of a comet, and then we'll be going into Halley's Comet. Now, a comet has basically three components. It has a nucleus, which is the actual center of the comet. It has a coma, which is the gaseous outer layer around the nucleus, and it has a tail. Now, there can be two types of tails. One can be a dust tail, and the other one can be a gas tail. The dust tail contains small particles that are formed by the pressure of the sunlight. The plasma tail, which is an ionized tail, is a tail that is basically formed through solar wind. Now, what solar wind is just ionized gas streaming out from the sun. It's the pressure of radiation, and therefore it sends the particles from the comet hurtling behind it. Now, if you look at the core of a comet over here, first this picture, this shows if you were to actually stand on the nucleus of a comet, it's just ice, dirt, dust, and frozen gas, and the pressure from the sun sends the tail hurtling off into outer space. And you can see particles here in the picture above breaking off from the comet. And that's basically what forms the tail. It's only 85 degrees Fahrenheit on Halley's Comet. It's not a hot hurling ball of fire, as some people would think. It's just a ball of ice no bigger than a few miles across. And that's what causes it to send out the tail. And what you're seeing, the light reflected on the tail is simply the sunlight reflecting off the frozen ice crystals that are sent hurtling backwards from the comet. Now, looking at the actual nucleus of a comet, here you can see it just looks like a dirty snowball. Fred Whipple from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics was the first to postulate that idea, and that was just confirmed, in fact, today by Giotto, the European Space Agency probe that went to within 300 kilometers of Halley's Comet. And as it gets closer to the sun, more particles begin to break off, and jets just break off from the comet and trail behind. Now, if a comet were to burn out, like the frame right here, it would become an asteroid, or at least that's what scientists and astrophysicists postulate at this time. They think that old comets could be asteroids. Let's look at a comet's trip around the sun now. A comet, when it's going around the sun, its tail is always heading away from the sun. So when it's heading in towards the sun, it reaches perihelion. The tail is always constantly heading away from the sun. Now, the orbit of Halley's Comet, as you can see in this particular picture down here, it reached aphelion in 1948. Aphelion is the farthest point in the comet's elliptical orbit. As you can see, it's a little slanted there. And that was in 1948 when the comet turned around. And it reached perihelion on February 9th, 1986. That's its closest approach to the sun. Now, Halley's is a periodic comet, a short-term periodic comet. It only takes anywhere from 75 to 76 years to go around the sun to come back. And this will be the 30th appearance of Halley's Comet, as we are seeing it for the 30th time. Now, let's take a look at some of the pictures. So basically, it's just a dirty snowball that's being pulled towards the sun. It's not on fire. It's just dust and ice particles breaking off from the comet. It's being pulled in from the sun. Now, where did it come from? It came from a cloud they're postulating now called the Opic Oort. That's named after a Norwegian and a Danish astronomer. And they think that this cloud contains 100 billion comets, and it's over 7 trillion miles away. Now, those are a lot of numbers to throw at you, but how do they get into our solar system? Well, very simply, all the stars are moving, expanding outward through the Big Bang Theory. And when our star passes through that cloud, it tends to pull some of these comets out of the cloud and thus brings them around the sun and into our solar system. Let's look at, first of all, some depictions of Halley. Now, this is a small picture, but we'll start from right here, A, where my little finger is. right there. Okay, now that there is a Chinese silk painting dated 168 BC. Right here. Very small picture, so you have to bear. But there we go, right there. Okay, now to the left of that is a comet seen by the Aztecs around 1500, labeled B. Labeled C is a Turkish drawing of the comet of 1577. D is a computer-enhanced photograph of Comet Bradfield. Okay, now going back to E, which is over here, E is Halley's Comet seen in 1066. That's taken from the Bayeux tapestry, which was originally embroidered in 1066. F, next to that, is taken from the Nuremberg Chronicles in 1493. And next to that is G. That drawing is based on a 3rd century description by Pliny. And adjacent to that, H, which is right here. H is a photograph of Comet Halley in 1910. I, which is up here, that is the comet seen in Britain in 1145. Next to that, J is Halley's Comet in 1301 from Giotto, which is right here. And adjacent to that is a drawing by a European astronomer seen in the 17th century, K, right here. And then L is Japan, seen from Japan around 1700. Again, these are smaller pictures, so bear with me. I have plenty of other ones. But let's take a look at the comet and what's happened through time. Now, comets traditionally have been known to bring about floods, plagues, famine, death of kings, disaster, etc. Now, that's just a superstition, but looking at the way Halley's Comet has come especially, you can see that it is paralleled with disaster and omens of kings have died and plague, etc., but it's also brought good luck to people. But let's look at it right now. In 1059 BC, perhaps that was the very first sighting. Now, we think that Halley's Comet has been seen for over 2,200 years. So, like I said, it's come over 30 times. In 240 to 239 BC, that was the first written record, and it was recorded in the chronicles of Shin-Chi and Wen-His-Thung-Kao. That's right. And leap year was introduced to the Egyptian calendar that year, and the Greek scientist Eratosthenes developed the heliocentric theory, which meant a sun-centered solar system as opposed to an Earth-centered solar system, which was proposed by Ptolemy. Now, the Earth's circumference was also measured by Eratosthenes, and he was the one who proposed the diameter, and he was only a few hundred miles up. Then came the comet in 164 BC. It was a star with a pointed tail, according to Chinese observers, but that's the only written record we have of the comet at that time. In 86 BC, it was recorded in the Chinese chronicles of, once again, Thung Chien Kung Mu. And Julius Caesar also saw it in 86 BC. And Asclepiades, a Greek physician, was practicing natural medicine in Rome at that time of the apparition in 86 BC, and the Roman Empire began to triumph in Italy after civil war had divided the Italian kingdom. In 11 BC, Roman general Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa dies in Rome, and that was an omen of his death. This is the first time the comet was called an omen of disaster. And then Caesar Augustus was the emperor of Rome at that time, and the Roman Empire began to expand into Egypt, Judea, and Germany, and the Roman Empire began to rule the world. In Rome, they began to pave streets. Gears developed. Animal-powered water wheels for irrigation fields became useful. Then in 66 AD, Flavius Josephus, in his History of the Jewish War, recorded the rebellion of Judea against Rome, and Jerusalem was destroyed. And quoting Josephus, he said, "The comet tail appears to represent the blade of a sword that was seen above the city for 1 year." Then came the sighting in continuing in 66 AD, the Gospel of St. Mark, St. John, and St. Matthew was written. And Nero, Emperor Nero, got a picture of him here, he began to persecute the early Christians in 66 AD. And Nero was so paranoid, one of his astrologers told him that the comet was a sign of imminent treachery within his family, so Nero decided to execute all of his lively successors in his family due to the astrologer's prediction. Nice guy, as he persecuted the Christians. In 141 A.D., the Chinese recorded that the comet was bright. It had a long tail and looked bluish-white, and for 4 weeks it was visible. And Antonius Pius was the emperor of Rome, and disease plagued China. And the Roman Empire began to cover much of the world at that time. In 218 A.D., the Greek writer Dio Cassius wrote, "A fearful star with a tail extending east to west. It was reported in the Chinese astronomical chronicles of Hu Han Shu Thung Qian Mao Tuang to go in the Han Dynasty, and it ended in China as far as the comet was seen in China, and they thought it was a sign of imminent treachery also. It led to 400 years of civil strife within China, or so they speculated, and still the Romans were persecuting Christians at that sighting. In 295 A.D., the comet was low in the eastern sky, very brilliant, as the Roman Empire began to break up under pressure from tribes like the Goths, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, and the Franks. And new machines came into being in 295 A.D., the cogwheel, screw, wedge, lever, and pulley. In 374 A.D., the comet came within 9 million miles of the Earth, which is a near miss, and it was recorded in the Chinese chronicles. I won't say the name again, we bored you enough with that. And the Huns invaded Europe, and the comet was blamed for that, as Attila the Hun began to slaughter most of Europe. There you see a picture of old Attila. Not a nice guy, very feared. He sent people in Europe fleeing, especially in Italy. But the Roman Empire was subdivided into Eastern and the Western Empire, and the Roman troops left Britain because of the strife in Italy due to Attila. In Europe, books replaced the scrolls, and the first books in Japanese history were recorded. And in 451, Attila, king of the Huns, he invaded France, but he lost in France in the Battle of Chalons. It was the most terrible, bloodiest war in recent history. The long-tailed star was blamed for the invasion, then credited for Attila's death. And Venice was founded by people fleeing from Attila the Huns, and the Roman Empire began to collapse. Indian astronomers began to do math work and worked on powers and roots of numbers at that time. In 530, the comet was seen in China and Europe. It wasn't very spectacular, but plague was going throughout Europe, and the comet was blamed for it. Justinian closed the 1,000-year-old school of philosophy in Athens, and he was the Byzantine emperor, and he issued his code of civil laws, which was a buckling down, a martial law of sorts throughout Europe. In 607 to 608, Chinese Pei Shi chronicled in his book, it was a tailed star across the heavens, and Muhammad, founder of the Islam living in Arabia at that time, also glimpsed the comet in 607 and 608. Smallpox broke out in Europe and Asia and was blamed on the comet. And books were printed for the first time in China. In 684, Mount Vesuvius erupted in Italy. Of course, it was blamed on Halley. The sighting was recorded all over the world. The 15th century Nuremberg Chronicle, similar to the picture I showed you earlier, noted that the comet brought 3 months of rain, disease, and plague to Europe. And following the eclipses, and that followed eclipses of both the sun and moon. English clergyman Venerable Bede said that comets bring disaster, war, disease, and deaths of kings. This was for the first time that somebody had actually come out and said that. Before, it was just a superstition that comets brought bad luck. In 760, the Chinese wrote down in their chronicles that it was a white broom star that swept across the heavens. The Arabic numbers came out in Baghdad, Iraq, and the Turkish Empire was founded. In Central America, the Mayans were learning astronomy, and they made accurate calendars based on their observations. The Mayans built temples to the sun and to the moon, and the Book of Kells, the beautiful manuscript, was written in Ireland. In 837, perhaps Halley's most spectacular view, it was a -4 magnitude, about the brightness of Venus. It came to within 3 to 4 million miles from the Earth, and the tail filled most of the sky. And they say that because of that, that many people were in fear. Louis I, Emperor of France and Germany, was so frightened that he built many new churches and monasteries. He was terrified. and the New World began to be roamed by the Vikings. Algebra was invented in Persia during 837, and the Arabs invaded France and settled in Italy. On March 22nd in 837 AD, the tail was reported at 10 degrees. Now, a full moon is half a degree, so you can imagine how big 10 degrees is. On April 9th, 837, it was reported to be a 66-degree tail, and it was in 2 sections. That was the closest the comet's ever come to Earth. On April 10th, the following day, the tail increased 10 degrees. It was 76 degrees, and that was recorded in Chinese chronicles. In the 912 apparition, it was very unspectacular, but it was mentioned in Japanese Dianonosky and perhaps in China. In 989, it wasn't a dramatic appearance either, but it was recorded by writers in England and China. In 1059, Otto I founded the Holy Roman Empire in Germany as Halley streaked across the heavens. Our number system was introduced to Europe by the Arabs as they created it in 1059, and Arab science, art, and philosophy reached all-time peaks. The apparition of 1066 was perhaps the most famous apparition. It was a spectacular apparition. It stopped the Battle of Hastings as the tail filled the entire sky. It was seen in Korea, Europe, and China. The Norman conquest of England by William the Conqueror as he defeated Saxon King Harold Fairhair at the Battle of Hastings. William's wife, Queen Matilda, and her ladies embroidered the Bayeux tapestry to commemorate the victory. And we'll show you some of that now. This particular tapestry, you can see in 374 it starts out, then 451, moving to the right. There's Mount Vesuvius erupting in 760. 837, that's when it filled the sky. That's the 912. And then in 989, so you see a 1066. If you watch now my finger, that's the comet right there that was recorded in 1066 as William the Conqueror defeated the Saxons and King Harold. And this tapestry was added onto throughout the years as Halley came in. And there you can see the Crusades depicted. But the Bayeux tapestry is still in existence today. As you can see, it's got wonderful colors, and that's not bad for a remnant that is close to 1,000 years old, excuse me. And this Bayeux tapestry depicts the history of the comet, and it was embroidered by William's wife, William the Conqueror's wife, Queen Matilda and her ladies, and this has tremendous color, as we previously said, for a document that's over 900 years old. It was never, and quoting an Anglo-Saxon chronicle, England saw such a token never seen in the heavens before by any man, Comet of the star. Now, during 1066, the astrolabe, an astronomical tool, was invented and brought to Europe from the east, and Macbeth, the King of Scotland, was defeated. Of course, he was in the Shakespearean tragedy. And in England, the Westminster Abbey was consecrated. And that is the Bayeux tapestry. Now, in 1145, Chinese chronicles noted that the comet was seen on April 26th in the morning, and there was no tail. It was a guest star. And during 1145, the Second Crusade failed, and many crusaders died in Asia, and once again, that was pointed to Halley's Comet. In 1222 and 1223, Genghis Khan, leader of the Mongol horde, invades China, India, and Persia. And he thought the comet brought him luck. He called it his special star, but it brought bad luck to the millions he butchered. And Henry III, the boy king of England, he was only 9 years old. England blamed their country's trouble on the comet as Mongols invaded Russia. Cotton came to Spain for the first time in 1222, and Vienna became a city which was established by the people who tried to flee from Attila the Hun. And Genghis Khan died in 1223, so I guess the comet didn't bring him that much luck, and it was a special star. In 1301, the comet was recorded from Iceland to Japan. Florentine painter Giotto used the comet to depict the Star of Bethlehem in his fresco, The Adoration of Magi. Now, if you can see up top of that, this is the right up top there, to the top of the picture, is the comet, right there. And that's what Giotto used for the Adoration of Magi. He later had a space probe named after him that went and observed Halley. In fact, it just passed through very recently. And there you see the fresco, Adoration of Magi. Edward I of England invaded Scotland, starting centuries of war once the comet came across the heaven. And Edward also defined what a yard and an acre would be considered. In Germany, medicine was dispensed for the first time by apothecaries. In 1378, the comet was seen in China. The Great Schism began with two popes, one in France and one in Rome, and playing cards were manufactured in Germany. Robin Hood appeared for the first time in English literature in 1378. In 1456, Pope Callistus III excommunicates Halley's comet. He called it fraudulent and unchristian. And he prayed for deliverance from the devil, the Turks, and the comet. The Turks were invading at that time. The East and the West were still crusading. Turks threatened Europe, but they were defeated in the Battle of Belgrade by Jan Hunyadi, and it was an omen of disaster for the Turks. In 1531, for the first time, it is recorded in Europe before it's recorded in China or Korea. Waves of superstitions and fears swept through Europe. Peter Appian of France described the tail of a comet, and he said it always points away from the sun. He was the first to propose that idea. And the great age of European exploration starts in the New World. Henry VIII founded the Church of England and cuts ties with the Roman Catholic Church, and Copernicus is alive and well. As he saw the comet, he was 58 years old. He was the father of modern astronomy. Old Nicholas Copernicus. And here's a picture of Henry VIII. He had marital problems, to say the least. Several wives. And he loved to eat. In 1607, the small band of settlers near the Kennebec River in Maine, led by George Popham at Fort St. George, recorded seeing a blazing star in the northeast. It was the first visual sighting documented in North America. Johannes Kepler saw the comet from his observatory in Prague, and the age of modern astronomy began at that point. In Virginia, the comet was called the Red Knife, as Jamestown was founded in 1607 by John Smith. And plague once again hit England, and the comet was blamed for it. Galileo saw the comet for the first time, and he built astronomical telescopes. In 1682, Halley saw the comet. It wasn't very spectacular, but it inspired his book against comet superstition. He predicted its return in 1759 and drew parallels with the apparition of the comet in 1531, 1607, and 1682. He said they were all the same. It was the same comet. It was unprecedented. No one had ever predicted the return of a comet before. Now, I want to show you a picture of Edmund Halley. Halley was good friends with Sir Isaac Newton. Halley helped fund Sir Isaac Newton's book, The Principia, which was, among other things, contained Newton's theory of gravity and his theory of elliptical orbits, which was first proposed by Johannes Kepler. But through Newtonian thought and also Kepler's thought, Halley proposed that the comet would return. Now, this guy, Edmund Halley, first of all, the name, people say Halley, Halley's, Hawleys. It's pronounced, some people with the H-A-L-L-E-Y spelling in England pronounce it Hawley. Others pronounce it Halley. I'm going to call it Healy's comet, just to spite them. Anyways, Edmund Halley he had the mouth of a sea dog. He was often heard in pubs swearing and cursing, and he'd send ladies running out into the street covering their ears. He had an affinity for brandy, but people look upon him as a famous astronomer, but he had a foul mouth, the mouth of a sailor. This is a fresco in 1577, which depicts comets with flood, famine, war, disease, death, and anything else that's bad, they blamed on the comet. Halley's was sort of a scapegoat. You can see the skeleton in the middle there riding on the horse that hasn't eaten for several weeks. In continuing on in 1682, Halley saw it and he predicted its return. And it was not very spectacular, but he predicted it would return again in 1759, which it did. Pennsylvania received the royal charter, so they were well on their way to statehood. It would be about 100 years, but at least they were. And France claimed the Louisiana territory led by La Salle. And Newton explained his tides through the theory of gravitation, that the moon was working on the waters on the surface of the earth. And a Boston Puritan, Increase Mather, he was a clergyman, said that the comet was a warning from God of impending calamity. And Halley said that was nonsense, and he in fact, said that comets had nothing to do with disaster. He was the first to denounce that. In 1759, the comet returns. Halley was right, and it was dubbed Halley's Comet. Unfortunately, Halley was dead. He predicted it, though, successfully, and that was never before done. And it was an excellent appearance in 1759, and during 1759, Quebec fell, and the French power and the New World ended as the French and the Indian War broke out, and the comet was blamed for that. Why not? In 1835, astronomers made physical studies of the comets, and they made accurate observations throughout Europe. Phineas T. Barnum begins his career as a showman, circusman, clown, what have you. The traveling show, the greatest show on earth. He was alive. And the New York Herald was published for the first time. And the first negative photograph was taken in England. And also, Mark Twain was born. I want to show you a picture of Mark Twain. Now, far over here, in the right-hand corner, is a picture of Twain. Just off my finger there, a picture of Mark Twain. Now, he was born on November 30th, 1885, 1835, and the comet was on perihelion at that time. In fact, the comet had reached perihelion only several weeks before that. He died, on April 20th, 1910, the exact day that the comet, Halley's Comet, had reached perihelion. And Twain said, "Here are these two unaccountable freaks. They came in together, they should go out together." So Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, died on perihelion. There's a nice commemorative stamp there from the Turks and Caicos Islands in the Caribbean with Twain on top of the comet, just to the right of Mark Twain's picture there. And it shows Twain riding on the gaseous snowball of the comet. So in 1835, Mark Twain was born, and Fred Hoyle said that comets may cause epidemics. Fred was wrong. And John Herschel, from the famous, his father was William Herschel, the famous astronomer, he saw it for the first time from South Africa. Many famous astronomers throughout history saw Halley's Comet. Then in 1910, let's start over here from the right. You could say commercialism broke out and fear and just a lot of mishandled information. People were terrified. Now, starting from the upper left-hand corner, you can see a young lady sitting on a crescent moon with Halley's Comet above her head, and she doesn't look too happy. Down to the lower left of that, you see a burglar climbing up the side of a house, and the owner of the house with a gun. And the burglar's response was just trying to get a better look at the comet. And he plummeted to his death after that picture, I'm sure. Then you see Comet Rag over to the right side. That's a music book. Comet songs and Comet Fever. There were comet parties throughout 1910. And then there are comet pills in the middle there. People took those. Now, in 1910, scientists postulated that the comet was, the Earth was going to pass through Halley's tail, and the tail was composed of cyanogen to go along with the ammonia and methane gas. And people thought that this cyanogen gas, which is a compound of cyanide, that they were going to die. Now, it was so vast. The tail, for instance, Halley's Comet tail, is so vast it can be packed within a suitcase. Okay, so that's how far apart the particles are. But people bought gas masks. They locked themselves in their houses, in their basements. They went into caves with oxygen masks and oxygen bottles. They took those. Those were for $1 a pop, those bottles of pills. They took those to protect them against the cyanogen. And, you know, $1 was a lot back in 1910, but some foolish things. Below that picture of the comet pills is a picture of William Howard Taft. Now, that comet is passing by the window. That's Halley's Comet, but it has a picture of, got a face of Teddy Roosevelt, who would haunt William Howard Taft and eventually defeat him for the presidency of the United States. To the right of that, you can see a street scene from the play Punch, and it shows a comet watcher looking up into the sky. Now,
To the left of the Howard Taft photo, you can see King Edward VII of England. He died in 1910. His death led to the fall of the House of Habsburg, which eventually precipitated World War I. So that would be the last time the comet was blamed on disaster. Now, below King Edward there, you see Halley's Comet not to blame for the gloomy days, it says Mr. Smith, as he took precedence and said that. To the left of that, you can see a rendition of the comet's appearance in 1835, the way it was drawn. Now, below there, the Halley's Comet not to blame, you see a picture of the Scientific American. That's April's edition in 1910. It shows where the comet will be over New York City in May of 1910. To the right of Scientific America, you can see, are you prepared to view Halley's Comet? Looks familiar. I've seen these advertisements in 1985 and 86. They're trying to sell telescopes, binoculars, etc., when all you need is just a decent pair of binoculars to view the comet. So that's one of the great misinterpretations of Halley's Comet. And then above that now, you'll see something that's very strange. You see a comet, it's a drawing. You can see that in the center of your screen. Now that's the Sacred Followers. They were a cult in 1910 that were trying to offer a human sacrifice to the comet. They thought it was the end of the world, and they were going to offer a human sacrifice as the comet blazed in the sky in Oklahoma. But right as they were about to sacrifice a young virgin, a posse came in from the Oklahoma State Police and rescued her, just like in the movies. And that cult, unfortunately, is still going on today. But in 1910, there was a lot of pictures shown there. Comet mania broke out, and a lot of people, took advantage of it, had parties. Some was worried about comet fallout. They had comet umbrellas and dance parties and all the rest. As the picture plummets. Now let's take a look at some of the pictures in 1910 of Halley's return, starting from the top. Halley returned in 1910. As you can see, some nice photographs. And also I'm going to show you this picture over here of Venus and Halley that fell down. Halley is actually moving as we speak. But there's a nice picture of Halley and Venus, okay? Now there you see the white smudge there is Venus, and then to the left of that is Halley. And there are 3 photographs taken of Halley with Venus, and then the one below that, to the right of the 2 photographs of Halley and Venus, is a photograph of Halley taken in 1909. Now, moving over to the right of that are more pictures, including a picture of Edmund Halley. And also, we have some computer-enhanced photographs right over here of Halley's Comet. Those were taken in 1910, and the colors were put in the 80s. There's a picture of Edmund Halley there with a depressed look on his face. Now let's look at some space probes up at Halley. Okay, we've got Giotto, which is the lower right-hand corner. That's by the European Space Agency. Now, as we videotape this tonight, Giotto had just passed to within 300 kilometers of the coma of Halley's Comet, and it revealed that it was almost heart-shaped. In fact, some of the transmission from Giotto was interfered with by Halley's, as they thought that the comet would inflict a lot of damage on the spacecraft, the satellite, which it did. But a lot of scientists were fearing that since Giotto was going so close to the nucleus, that it would in fact destroy the comet itself, obliterate it, which is a possibility, seeing that the head is only a few miles in diameter. And then there's also Japan's Planet A, and also their Sagiaki space probe, which is up there in the right-hand corner. The Russians sent Vega 1 and Vega 2 through Halley's Comet, and they sent back some spectacular photos I'm going to be getting to in just a short moment. But let's get to some photographs now of Halley. First ones I want to show you are taken by, the first one here is the first, let me get something to lean this on here so you can get a good look at it. The first photograph of Halley on its return was in September of 1984. Do you see where that arrow is pointing? The tip of that arrow is Halley. Now, it's just a faint smudge, but it's Halley nonetheless. Then some computer-enhanced photographs here in February of 1985. Take into consideration, this is over a year ago, and comets, they move very quickly. The comet moves about 100,000 miles per hour. And, of course, the speed increases as it approaches the sun. But here are some computer-enhanced photographs, and there's a smudge of Halley down here in the right-hand corner, taken on February 19th, 1985. And then here's a photograph of Halley just circled here in this circle. That's taken on March 14th, 1985. And then to the left of over here, we have a computer-enhanced photograph of Halley taken on March 23rd. So these were the very first photographs that we saw of Comet Halley. Then came August of 1985. The first true photographs of Halley. Now here's a computer-enhanced photograph of Halley. Between the tick marks here, this is August 23rd, 1985. And this is August 25th, 1985. Again, it was very distant and far off. But Halley would get very much closer here, as these photographs were taken in September of 85 with a commemorative Halley's patch and the like. Now here it is as a magnitude 14 on September 5th. It's right there off where that piece of paper is. Then on October 17th, you can see it getting closer. And then here it is on November 8th, 1985. And here's another picture of it in September, in between the tick marks. And there's some Halley commemoratives. Did you miss it? They estimate less than 1% of all the people on the face of the Earth will get the chance to see Halley's Comet. I'm going to be giving you the coordinates where to look in just a short while. More pictures of Halley in September as comets fly off the desk. Here are some pictures taken on various days in September. Bear with me, they're between the tick marks, those two lines, but starting anywhere. This one, for instance, over here, was taken on September 13th. Above it was September 12th. Now the tick marks are right here. Very difficult to see, I know. And then below this is a computer-enhanced photograph taken on the 25th. And then over to adjacent to that, we see pictures on the 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th at 10th magnitude of Halley's Comet. We've got some better ones coming up here, though. Now, here's a color photograph of Halley, right there in the center as it speeds towards our sun. And here's a photo of actual movement by Halley amongst the stars. Now, if you watch, starting from here, right here where my finger is, you can actually see it moving. It's right there. It's moving right across. That's September, and here it is Halley right here. Now comes October of 85, some pictures of Halley. First off, we have this color photograph. As you can see, it's beginning to develop the tail. Now, when these comets are in outer space, they don't have a tail. The tail develops as it moves closer to the sun. The tail can span up to 50 million miles. Okay, that's more than half the distance from the Earth to the sun. And here's a sequential photograph of Halley shown in movement in 3 hours. And then finally down here, this is as it passed the nebula in Orion, the mighty Orion constellation, right behind that. Then in November of 85, a nice apparition of Halley's Comet. You can notice the bluish-white tint to it, and that's just the sun's reflection. More pictures in November of 85. That's the bright dot in the middle is Halley. That's November 7th, 1985. And here's November 6th. Not much different. Those trails, incidentally, you see, are star trails. The Earth's rotation is such that they have to keep the lens open for a certain time to get this exposure and to record detail, the fuzzy patch. Coma, incidentally, means hairy in Latin. And then here it is, Halley streaking by the Pleiades, which are the seven sisters. The Pleiades are very young stars, and they're oftenly confused for the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, excuse me. But these stars were not in the sky when dinosaurs were on the Earth. They're enveloped by gas. They're very young, hot stars. In fact, scientists think that stars are being born as we speak within the Pleiades. Another photograph of Halley in November 7th to be exact, 1985. And then comes December. Now in December, the tail is beginning to get pronounced. You can see it starting to develop. December 9th, I believe, 1985, these photographs are taken, and the tail is starting to develop as it gets close to the sun. Now, I viewed Halley for the first time through a friend of mine's telescope right after Thanksgiving, and it just appeared to be just a smudge, a hairy star almost. But it was very interesting, and we're going to try to go up and see it when it reaches its greatest brightness around here. The only thing is you've got to get out at 4 in the morning. I'll get to more of that later. Here's a photograph of Halley, computer enhanced, December 9th, 1985. Now, if you notice, this is December 9th, 1985. It's very similar to the pictures we have that we showed you earlier, the computer enhanced photographs of 1910. The coma looks very similar, and the nucleus. Here's December 15th, 1985 of Halley. As you can see, the jet coming out, the tail is starting to develop. This is December 17th, 1985. Once again, the tail is developing. This is right before we lost it in the solar glare because it went around the sun and it was not visible to Earth. Now, look at these multiple gas tails. This is in December. The multiple jets right over here, bursting off the tail of Halley, taking in December, as the tail will break up. Here is Halley on December 13th, 1985. And on the back, we see it on December 29th, a few days prior to it. Halley is right here. This is Halley on the 13th. Look at the brightness of the nucleus. This is a super exposure, but look at how bright. You can actually see the pinpoint dot in the middle. That's the nucleus. And getting very bright at that time. And more Halley. This is on the 30th of December. Notice a prominent tail now. The tail starting to develop as it got closer and closer to the sun. In January of 1986, right before we lost it to the sun's glare, there you see it. Look at the tails squirting out from behind. That's just dust and ice crystals breaking off from the head of the comet as it's being pulled towards the sun. It's basically melting. I told you about that automobile theory where you have the clown driving down the highway who doesn't brush off his car after a snowstorm, and you see snow flying off. That's basically, that's a poor analogy, but it's basically the best one I could say about Halley. Here's Halley on my birthday in January. I won't tell you when or what year, but that's it right there. Oh, get a shot there for you, Rob. And then nuclear jets, or at least that's what they call them, are shooting out from Halley in this particular sequence of photographs. Now, if you look here, there's a jet firing out from the nucleus, and that's nuclear jet from the nucleus. Okay. Now we get into February and recent photographs. This is photograph, incidentally, January 10th, taken January 10th. Now we have another one. This is February 9th, 1986. This is right after perihelion. There you see the comet Halley. And then the first photograph sent back from Vega 1, the probe sent up by the Soviet Union. There you see it. It's a computer-enhanced photograph, and you can see the detail of the nucleus. They say it almost has a heart shape to it, which is very interesting. And here's another view. This is a view of the core of Halley's comet. And involved in this project were the Soviet Union, Hungary, France, and Czechoslovakia. That was sent back by Vega. There you see the photograph of it. And there's still a space probe to go through. The United States was going to send up a probe in the space shuttle for March '86, but that, of course, has been canceled. Now, what about the comet in the future? Those are, incidentally, the most recent photographs I have of Halley up to date. What will it look like in the year 2062 when it comes back? Answer? This is a view from the moon with the Earth in an eclipse. I hope it's the moon, and I hope that's not the Earth in 2062. But there's a shot, artist rendering. And that's basically what I have. I have another few here from Sky and Telescope magazine, incidentally. If you want to learn about astronomy, the magazine to get is Sky and Telescope by the Sky Publishing Company in Cambridge, Mass. This is everything and anything you'd ever want to know about astronomy is contained in this book. So it's very interesting, too. Some numbers to call, phone numbers. You may want to jot these down. If you want to track Halley or just find out what planets are up in the sky or what astronomical news is happening, you have 491-1497. That's 491-1497. That's the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, and it's updated every week. That's on Thursday, and tells you what's happening in the night skies and in the morning skies. There's also 497-4168. That's Skyline, provided by Sky and Telescope magazine, and that updates you nationally what's happening in astronomy and also what's happening in the sky. Now, before I close, I just want to show you how you can see Halley's Comet. Now, this was filmed in the second week, or videotaped in the second week of March, but I do have some guides here for you to look at. Now, if you want to see Halley's Comet for the week of March 15th through the 22nd, okay, actually through the 21st, that would be the best time to see it, only because the moon will be up in the sky. Now, to see that, you're going to have to get up at about 3:30 in the morning to adjust your eyes to get your night vision, because it's going to rise at that period at 3:45 a.m. That's right, 3:45 in the morning it's going to rise. So a lot of people don't want to get up to see the comet. And, you know, I like astronomy and everything, but I do have difficulty with that time in the morning. Hopefully we can go up into an airplane. I have it set up with the pilot to go up there and actually try to videotape the comet, which is unprecedented. Any videotape of the comet would be very rare indeed, but that's something that I'd like to do, despite the 3:45 in the morning time. Also, if we can take a look at these charts over here. Now, let's start over to the upper left-hand corner, the blue chart. And actually, you can't, well, there you go. Zoom in on it. That shows you how big the tail will be. Okay, now, it's actually, the tail will be at its longest at about April 5th. Now, we're 42 degrees north latitude, and it's going to be very low on our east-southeastern horizon, actually our southeastern horizon. So the only place to see it, for us to see it, would be going up to the Blue Hills, and at 3:45 in the morning, though, I'd go up there with a big group. Or you could go to a beach, get a good southeast horizon, perhaps on the outer arm of the cape, or go up to one of the mountains, whether it be Wachusett in western Massachusetts, or going up to some of the mountains in New Hampshire. Those get a high elevated place with a clear horizon, with no obstructions in the horizon, and that's the only way you're going to see Halley's Comet. Now, when you're talking the tail, a naked eye tail observance was seen last week that covered 19 degrees. Okay, then that's a lot. 19 degrees. Your arm, at arm's length, the width of your hand is 5 degrees. So you're talking 19 degrees. You're talking about that much, which is pretty big in the sky. If you see a moon, the moon, I said, is a half degree, a full moon. So if you make that comparison. Looking at some of the other charts there, by April, it's going to be so low on the horizon, you'll be searching in vain for it, the comet. You'd have to be in a southern latitude. But if you're in my financial bracket, you'll be viewing it from the northeast. You're not going to be going south. And the best times to view it, once again, are from the 15th to the 21st of March for 42 degrees north latitude, only because there will be no moon in the sky, and it will be high enough to see. It'll be worth getting up at 4 in the morning. But the comet itself, this isn't one of the best apparitions in the 30 times it's come to visit the Earth. In fact, it's a very disappointing apparition for us here in the Northeast. I saw it prior to perihelion, and, you know, it was enlightening when I first saw it, but after a while it looks like a hairy star. And Halley's, or Healy's as we dubbed it here for the show, has received so much acclamation and notoriety, and it's just a regular comet. The only reason why it's so famous is because Edmund Halley predicted its return, that it would return. And, you know, his hair is similar to mine. But basically, what you're going to see in Halley's Comet, you've got to get out to the east-southeast sky. Okay, you've got to get your eyes set. You need to acquire night vision to get your eyes set. If you've been in a bright room and you go outside, your eyes still have that brightness in it. And conversely, if you're in a bright sky and you come into a dark room, etc., it's hard to adjust. So you want to adjust your eyes there. Whether or not it's worth getting up there, if you do have a clear east-southeast horizon and you happen to get up for a drink of water in the middle of the night, you might want to look for it. But otherwise, some sort of expedition out to see it, unless you really want to see it, you'd have to take a good pair of binoculars. You don't need a telescope, but just a regular pair of binoculars, any type of binoculars, you could go out and see it. And snap a picture. You'd want to get some high-speed film, and you'd want to leave the shutter open for a certain amount of time. The longer you leave, for 2 minutes, the longer you leave the shutter open, the better the tail will come. So that's basically my lecture on Halley's Comet this evening. The pictures and it's a poor man's tour of Halley's Comet, but I hope it was informative. And once again, the space probe's going through the Comet. They're going to be bringing back some spectacular film and footage for you. But that's Halley's Comet. I hope to come back in the future and tell you about other comets. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comets that have been sighted throughout the history by man. But that's it. I'd like to thank everybody who helped me out with this. Mary Simons, Rob Scott, Cindy Johnson, and Lynn O'Brien for helping me out in bringing this to you. Have a nice one, everybody, and I hope you get a chance to see the comet.